Maybe the real ugly was the friends we made along the way.
Promise.
You get the surgery?
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I like to talk about entertainment media. After making videos about both the source material and then the film adaptation of It Ends With Us, I decided that I would try to do something similar for the new Netflix film Uglies, which is based on the YA book by Scott Westerfeld. I had never heard of Uglies before seeing the film's trailer, though it seems to have a fair few fans. When I skimmed through the comment section of the film's promotion, there are folks saying that they read these books in middle school in the 2000s and are expressing their hopes that the full series will get adapted as well. Do I believe that will happen? Well, I suppose we will get to that. I went to the library and I checked out a copy of Uglies, only the first book. I have not read the other books in the series because, as far as I'm aware, this feature film is only adapting from that first book. Uglies is followed by 3 more books, Pretties, Specials, and Extras. A friendly reminder to support your local library by getting a library card, even if you are not planning on going very frequently, because getting the library card is helpful to the funding of libraries as a community resource. Also, it was far more preferable to me to go check out the book from the library because I only needed to have it as a resource for coverage. I don't need a permanent copy of the book on my desk. I need that desk space for 4K physical media of films. This video will have plot spoilers for Uglies the book, and by extension, presumably plot spoilers for the film as well, although I have not seen the film just yet. I'm going to go through the book's plot and the film's main trailer and give a few additional thoughts about this being adapted.
All the flaws you have today will be gone tomorrow with one elegant procedure.
The Uglies book is split into 3 parts. Part 1 is called Turning Pretty, Part 2 is The Smoke, and Part 3 is Into the Fire. The book's protagonist is a girl named Tally Youngblood. She is approaching her 16th birthday. The story is set a couple of centuries into the future, where a new society and way of living has been implemented after society as the reader knows it ended, collapsed, or whatever you would like to call it. In this new world, children are given plastic surgery when they turn 16 to become pretty. Tally lives in a place called Uglyville, where adolescents move to when they turn 12. They live in dormitories and they refer to each other using crude nicknames that involve some sort of appearance-based insult. And that's where they stay until they hit their 16th birthday, at which point they get their operation, after which they're able to move to New Pretty Town, which is the name of the first chapter. Every chapter in this book has a title. The titles are not numerically listed. New Pretty Town is a hustling, bustling city where new pretties live and live silly, frivolous, vapid lives. Pretties eventually get 2 more operations, one to become middle pretties. Think of those people as grown, mature adults with a job and children. And the final operation to become late pretties, who are the elderly members of society who live in Crumblyville. Tally sneaks out to New Pretty Town to try to go see her childhood best friend Paris, who has recently had his pretty operation. He is slightly older than her, which is why there's this gap in them being able to stay together as friends. Since he is 3 months older, he had his operation first. She steals a pig mask and goes to Garbo Mansion, where she is chased by some new pretties because her outfit isn't on theme of the party happening there, and she's wearing a pig mask that she had stolen from some other event in New Pretty Town. Tally eventually finds Paris and discovers that his hand scar is gone. They had made matching hand scars together as a symbol of their friendship, but the pretty surgery is so thorough that you do get brand new skin. Paris tells her that yes, they are still friends, but she needs to get back and not get into any other trouble, and to come back in 3 months after she's had her birthday and been made pretty just like he has. He tells her to use the roof to escape, which she does. There are bungee jackets up there, one of which she steals to jump off the roof without going splat. While sneaking back, Tally meets another ugly named Shay, who has a hoverboard. They become friends, and Shay teaches her how to use a hoverboard. Tally and Shay have the same birthday, but Shay is not looking forward to getting the operation, and she actually doesn't like to think of herself or any of them that have not had their surgeries yet as ugly. Shay also insists that they use their real names instead of those appearance-based nicknames that uglies typically use. Tally's nickname is Squint because of her eyes. Paris's nickname before his operation had been Nose, and Shay's nickname is Skinny. Part of what the uglies have been taught is that being made pretty and getting this operation is supposed to be an equal equalizer of sorts. There's a mention in passing of how several centuries prior, people used to do things like kill each other for being different skin colors. One of the world building details you learn further into the book is that the beauty standard that is programmed for everyone to be molded to is supposed to be a sort of coded average amalgamation. So if you have any sort of feature with your body or face that stands out significantly as being different, that will be redone to be more in alignment with an average standard. So if you're skinnier than the standard, your body will be more filled out after the operation. If your nose was more large or prominent, it will be redone to be less prominent, and so on and so forth. One of the things Shay mentions in passing in conversations with Tally is a roller coaster. Tally does not know what that is. Shay suggests to her that they should go see one together, and they use their hoverboards to make that journey. Further world building details: whether it's Uglyville or New Pretty Town, these places have a metal grid under the ground, and it's a magnetized system that makes these hoverboards run. There's a sensor you wear at your abdomen where your center of gravity is, and you also wear bracelets that help to keep you from falling. The journey Shay and Tally take is to go really far out from their city to a place called the Rusty Ruins, which is essentially an old abandoned city reminiscent of the time period of the book readers. Part of the journey to get there, their hoverboards do not work unless they're traveling over water where there are mineral deposits in that water. But if they are traveling over land, the hoverboard does not work, and it will weigh more because they don't have the metal to make the board feel like it weighs little to nothing. Shay and Tally have to visit the Rusty Ruins secretly. Now, Uglies do go there sometimes on school trips, but those visits are controlled, whereas Shay and Tally, they go there and they have free reign to explore wherever they like, including the roller coaster, which they're able to use their hoverboards to ride in a way because of all the metal. The hoverboards work in the Rusty Ruins because there is loads of old metal in the city from things like buildings. Shay says she wants to introduce Tally to someone named David who lives out there even further than the Rusty Ruins. Shay sends up a flare to signal David, but neither he nor anyone else shows up, so the girls head back to Uglyville. We're getting closer now to Shay and Tally's birthday, and they have a fight. It's a philosophical disagreement because Shay does not want to get the operation, and she fundamentally disagrees with this way of life entirely, but Tally does not feel the same way as her. But it's a trick, Tally. You've only seen pretty faces your whole life. Your parents, your teachers, everyone over 16. But you weren't born expecting that kind of beauty in everyone all the time. You just got programmed into thinking anything else is ugly. Initially, at this point in the story, I wasn't all that invested in the material because to me, at that point, it was feeling fairly superficial. To be fair, it's a YA book, and if I'm going to read something, I would probably prefer to read something made explicitly for adults, but it was also because at this point in the story, it was seemingly only dealing with a very specifically superficial adolescent perspective on unrealistic beauty standards. Unrealistic beauty standards can, of course, affect people of all ages, but that's not really the way the topic was being addressed at this point. And eventually, I did find myself more invested in the book's material, but there was a very specific revelation that had to happen that flipped the switch and make me fully understand the full vision of what the story was going for and what it was addressing. And I will tell you what that revelation is once we get to that point in the story. We are now 1 week away from Tally and Shay's birthday. They have not spoken to one another since their argument. Shay arrives at Tally's room late at night, and she is sneaking out to see her one last time, and she shows that she has a bunch of survival supplies and reveals to Tally that she's going to run away to be where David lives. Shay had planned to run away previously with some others, but Shay had gotten too scared to do so, so she didn't end up going with them. There is somewhere else they can live out there beyond the ruins, and it's a secret place where people are not separated into Uglies being over here and pretties being over there, as well as those different brackets of pretties, and people who live there do not get those operations. It's called the Smoke. It's not a city, and nobody's in charge, and nobody's pretty. Shay now has solar cells installed on her hoverboard, so she will no longer require metal to be able to make the board run. The way that the solar cells work is that you just have to let the board charge if the charge is running low and you want to be able to have it keep running. But otherwise, yeah, this means that new levels of freedom of transportation are unlocked. Tally decides not to go with her, but Shay leaves her a note that has coded instructions that only Tally is supposed to be able to figure out that will get her to where she needs to be if she would like to join Shay Shay in reaching the smoke. Operation day comes. Tally goes to where she needs to be to get her surgery, but a pretty, albeit scary-looking man tells her there's a problem with her operation and she needs to come with him. Tally is taken to a place called Special Circumstances, and this is a secret organization full of pretty people that are also very scary-looking. The big boss of Special Circumstances is Dr. Cable, who in the film is played by Laverne Cox, and if nothing else, I am absolutely ready to see Laverne Cox play this role, because this is how Dr. Cable is introduced. The woman was a cruel pretty. Her nose was aquiline, her teeth sharp, her eyes a non-reflective gray. Her voice had the same slow, neutral cadence as a bedtime book, but it hardly made Tally sleepy. An edge was hidden in the voice, like a piece of metal slowly marking glass. Now, Dr. Cable is scary and she is bad news. And if nothing else, I will expect Laverne Cox to carry this movie on her shoulders as long as they give her enough material and things to do. Special Circumstances is an organization that deals with threats from the environment, threats from outside the cities they live in, and Dr. Cable says that they've been watching Shay for a while. They're aware of Uglies running away and they thought that Shay would stay put because she had made a new friend. Tally. Tally is informed that if she doesn't do her best to help Special Circumstances, she will never have her surgery and she will never be made pretty. The problem is, Tally had made a promise to Shay to never reveal what she knows about where Shay went. So Tally is sent back to her dorm room and she's hiding out and embarrassed to be seen by anyone because they all know that she's 16 now and should have had her surgery. But she hasn't had it and she looks the same. Tally is visited by her parents who don't really react with the level of consoling, nurturing energy you would expect parents to have when their daughter is distressed. They're fairly cheerful, actually, and they tell Tally to just do whatever it is that Special Circumstances want and things will be fine. Tally is still sneaking out to go hoverboarding because she's feeling restless and upset, and one night she comes back after sneaking out and finds that Paris is in her room waiting for her. He reminds her of the promise she made to him at the very beginning of the book to not do anything stupid and to just go get pretty and be with him again as best friends forever. Tally thinks about how she made that promise to Paris before she promised Shay not to snitch, and then she decides that's a good enough excuse to message Dr. Cable that she will do what they want, and 20 minutes after she sends that message, a car comes and picks her up to bring her back to Special Circumstances. Dr. Cable gives Tally a survival kit full of things that she will need to make her journey, and she also gives Tally a heart pendant to wear as a necklace. Whenever she reaches the smoke, she can open the pendant and it will scan Tally's eye, and Special Circumstances will be there in a few hours. And the eye scan is only set up to work for Tally's eye. Now we reach part 2 of the book. Tally leaves and no one is informed about her mission, not even her parents. She follows Shay's coded note to the roller coaster, and I'm going to skip through a lot of the details of her journey and decoding the note because I'm assuming that the film will just montage this part. It doesn't feel like something they would spend the level of runtime on to the level of detail that it goes into in the book. I do think the traveling she does is important for her to connect more with nature in a new way, but I think she can just as easily achieve that once she reaches the smoke. At one point on her journey, a large machine appears and it scares her because it's very big and very loud and she doesn't know what it is. It's a helicopter, but she hides from it and the people inside do not see her. She finds a field full of tall white flowers and she goes to sleep in them and wakes up to find that everything is on fire. The helicopter has come back and has these giant flamethrowers that they're using to attack these white flowers. Now, initially when I read this, I thought this was going to set up some sort of environmentalist detail of the story, but actually the people in the helicopter are rangers and they rescue Tally from the flowers and explain to her that these white flowers are an invasive species that destroy natural wildlife. I think the flowers were engineered by some mad scientist types or something to that effect anyway. The Rangers know about the smoke, but they don't know the exact location because it is a secret. However, they do have a cordial understanding with the smoke, so they drop Tally off where she needs to be to wait to be picked up and brought to the smoke. And they also give her some new shoes because her old ones got destroyed in the fire that they created. Tally is eventually met by Shay and 3 other Uglies who are able to use a tool to detect a tracking device device on Tally's hoverboard. She didn't know that the tracking device was there, and she gets scared that this is going to expose her as a spy, but they don't hold it against her because they say that it's fairly standard for these devices to be on the supplies that runaways steal when making these journeys to join the smoke. So they take the tracking device with the intention that they're going to put it on a bird so that it will just end up somewhere in South America. David is one of the uglies that is picking up Tally, and Tally notes that she thinks he looks nice, and we get this quote that is rather poignant. She wondered how much of being ugly was just an awkward age. So you can definitely get the sense that this is tapping into adolescent insecurity. Tally gets to see a library in the smoke. It's basically a cabin that has a bunch of old magazines kept in plastic covers, and she's taken aback by the variety in how people used to look with both their faces and bodies. She sees a model and is shocked by how skinny the model is because Tally is only aware of what eating disorders are from history lessons in school. There's an old man in his 40s who manages the library, and Tally is especially shocked to see him because she has never seen someone that age who hasn't had the surgeries. Tally lies about her journey. She has to pretend as though she left before her birthday, when in actuality she left a couple of days after her birthday. She gets a work assignment to help them pull up old railroad tracks that they're using to build hover paths for the hoverboards. Remember that they need metal so that the boards that don't have solar power can still run. The smoke has a bartering system, so the remaining dehydrated food packets Tally didn't use up on her journey are something that she can now use to trade for things like a new sleeping bag since her old one got shredded by the helicopter, and a handmade sweater. Tally learns that David was born in the smoke. His parents went out there while they were middle pretties who worked as doctors. They didn't do the third operation. They were, however, apparently able to reverse the pretty procedure while they were out in the wild. Tally begins to feel conflicted the more she learns because she comes to understand that if she goes ahead and activates her tracker, it's going to destroy this town and way of life for everyone that lives there, including David. Shay believes that Tally has met someone special, romantically speaking, after Shay had left, and that that's who the heart pendant is from, and Tally just continues to feel even more guilty. David gives Tally a pair of leather gloves, and they're ones that he made a long time ago that are now too small for his hands. Another young person out in the smoke named Croy becomes suspicious of Tally because the mathematics of how many spag bowls, that's what her food packets are called because those food packets are all dehydrated spaghetti bolognese. The number of spag bowls do not match the story that she told. How many she said she had at the beginning and end of her journey, when her journey was supposed to have began, and when she actually arrived. The math is not mathing. Now this scares Tally, and she approaches Shay, wanting to tell her about Croy's suspicions, but before she can say any of that, Shay proceeds to express jealousy and sadness over David now apparently favoring Tally. Shay already had feelings for David, but David is not reciprocating, especially now that Tally is there. And this is the very juvenile YA part of the story that really does nothing for me. There are far more interesting facets of the material. I don't mind that David and Tally have a thing, romantically speaking, that's going on, but it's just making things messier with Shay's feelings in the mix, and that's just something I don't like. Shay implores Tally to tell David what she believes is the truth about the pendant, that she has a romantic someone back in Uglyville who might join them at some point. David approaches Tally when she's eating alone and takes her elsewhere so that they can talk, and he commends Tally for making the journey that she made to the smoke alone, and he says that nobody else has done it in that way. She had never even met David or anyone from the smoke. All Tally knew was what Shay had told her. David has the sense that someone might come to the smoke, some romantic partner that gave Tally the pendant, but he doesn't hold that against her because Tally and David had not met and had not started up whatever romantic thing is happening between them when she had apparently gotten involved with this other person. Tally admits she doesn't know if she's going to stay in the smoke and that maybe she'll go back. And for clarity, this wouldn't be an unheard of thing for her to do because some runaways that come to the smoke do change their mind and go back and become pretty. Tally has the thought that she's beginning to see David as beautiful despite his not having had any surgery to become pretty. And then David asks Tally to meet his parents. They live in a secret house in the side of a mountain, and their names are Az and Maddie. Tally is surprised to find that David looks so much like his father, and this is when Tally learns that these pretty procedures average everyone's faces into more of a standard template that removes the distinct family features that would cause a specifically familial resemblance by way of genetics. David then asks his parents to tell Tally a big secret, which is the truth about being pretty. What is revealed next is ultimately what made me find the story as a whole interesting. Does it bode well that it took this long to reveal? Well, who can say? Maybe they will reveal the information sooner to the movie audience than they do to Tally in the book, and by extension the reader. Az and Maddie reveal that they were not just doctors, they were cosmetic surgeons. They were doing research to try to make the surgery safer because the procedures do kill a couple of people each year because of how long those people have to stay unconscious under anesthesia. The anesthetic that is used in the procedure causes tiny lesions in the brain. Az and Maddie began testing people and found that the only people who didn't have those brain lesions were people who worked in professions that dealt with conflict, danger, challenges, basically anybody that needs to be able to react quickly. So people like firefighters, wardens, doctors, politicians, and of course, special circumstances. This means that the lesions are an intentional design of the system. People who get that first procedure, everybody has those brain lesions afterwards. But if you are assigned one of those high intensity professions, your lesions are healed for you. The lesions are a tool of control to stop controversies, disagreements, and of course, stop people from demanding change. Being made pretty doesn't merely change the way that people look, it changes the way people think. This was the massive reveal that made me go, okay, now you have my attention. If you focus more on this Stepfordian angle, those Minority Report vibes, I might stand a chance of actually liking this film adaptation if it's done well. If you focus on the adolescent melodrama and superficial commentary about people's physical appearances, I will probably be more lukewarm in my feedback. Anyway, Az and Maddie were visited by special circumstances who took away the data they'd been gathering in their research. They told the doctors to stop looking under threat of losing their licenses, so Az and Maddie decided to run away. That's what they did. This is where they ended up, and so began the smoke. There's a special kind of smart plastic used to shape people's bones in these pretty surgeries, and adding a trigger chemical makes the plastic softer, like clay, so Az and Maddie gave themselves injections to make their faces mostly go back to how they would have been before the operations. Some of the changes are still in place, like good teeth, strong vision, and disease resistance, but otherwise they look the way that they would have. This revelation is something Tally has to take into consideration in whether or not she wants to return. After leaving Az and Maddie's house, David tells Tally she's beautiful, and she's taken very aback by this because she has lived her whole life being told that people are ugly without the surgery, but after a bit of back and forth, she accepts the compliment. They kiss. He asks her about the pendant once again, so she takes it to a fire and throws it in, and a small pop comes from it as if something trapped inside had exploded. She feels tired from everything that she's learned, so she says that she wants to rest, and the next morning she wakes up and finds that everything around her is on fire. Now we are at part 3. Special circumstances have rolled up on the smoke and are destroying things and taking people captive. Tally gets snatched up and put into the rabbit pen with other people. Croy is surprised when he hears that Tally had resisted, and he thinks that he was wrong in the suspicions he had towards her. Shay is then brought forward, captured and bloodied, and she lashes out at Tally because she blames her for everything that has happened with special circumstances now showing up, as well as the drama with David. When the specials realize who Tally is, they take her out of the pen and they bring her to the library, which has now been converted into a headquarters for the invasion, and Dr. Cable has set herself up there. Tally learns that if the pendant was damaged, it would automatically send a signal back to special circumstances, so it was in fact Tally's fault that they showed up. Even if Tally didn't intend to let them know at that moment in time, that is in fact what happened. Dr. Cable asks Tally about the pendant, and Tally lies, saying that she hid it somewhere, so a special is instructed to escort her to this hiding spot, and Tally tricks him and steals a hoverboard and manages to get away. She flies over the rabbit pen while she's making her escape, and she's pursued by hover cars, and she deduces that they are tracking her by her body heat, so she does a maneuver that sends the board flying off in one direction while she climbs through some rocks to hide inside a mountain, where she finds David also hiding in the dark. They decide to return to the smoke and rescue his parents and everyone else that's been captured, but once they return, they find that everything has been burned, destroyed, and the people that had been taken captive are now taken away. Tally finds a bunch of shoes left behind and realizes that Croy had recognized her when she flew overhead and that he knew she didn't have any shoes. And she gets really emotional at the thought that he would have told everyone that it was her that had flown overhead and that they needed to leave her their shoes, and that Croy had known that she would come back. Along with everything else, the library has been burned, but thankfully there is a duffel bag that was hidden away with a bunch of magazines still inside, wrapped in their plastic covers. However, the boss, that's the librarian, he's been killed. They go to David's parents' home, which has also had a lot of deliberate fire damage, but there are not any bodies inside, and Az's knife is still there, and David says that his father never would have made an escape without that knife. Therefore, they realize David's parents have also been taken captive. Through all of this, David seems to start to be piecing together that not all of the details of Tally's story is adding up, but he doesn't ever fully confront her on it. She just continues to lie, and I don't know, maybe if there weren't other more pressing issues, like the fact that everything around them is destroyed and the people are gone, perhaps David would have put more energy into trying to figure out why her story doesn't add up, but I suppose he's a bit distracted. David shows Tally a giant hidden stash of survival supplies that his parents had kept in case of an emergency. They begin to make their journey back to the city, and David teaches Tally that the reason the world of the readers was destroyed was that some sort of bacterium had infected the oil supply. It was a world running on petroleum after all. So when the oil would get infected, it would explode on contact with oxygen, and as it burned, the spores would get released by way of the smoke, and that's how it would spread. They eventually reach the city, and Tally determines that they need to steal bungee jackets because they can use the hoverboards to launch themselves over the fence back into special circumstances, but they will need those bungee jackets so that they do not go splat. They meet some runaways named Sussy, Anne, and Dex who want to come join the smoke. So those three get recruited to help them by creating a diversion so that the bungee jackets can be stolen. The diversion comes in the form of some sparklers that say in the sky, "The smoke lives." Tally and David use the boards and the jackets to get into special circumstances. They find Dr. Cable and knock her out. And who do you think is with her? Shay, who has now been made pretty. They get Maddie and the other prisoners out, and because of the brain lesions from the procedure, Shay is no longer even mad at Tally for the betrayal or the drama with David. Shay is even nice enough to help them escape. It's weird because she's kind of got this snobby, pampered, whiny demeanor where she will complain when things are a bit challenging, but she also still regards the group as her friends. Upon rescuing David's mother, Maddie, she tells them that they cannot help Az, David's father, and when David presses her about this, Maddie informs him that Az has not been made pretty, he is now dead. The group gets away on their boards and they scatter the tracking devices that were used to monitor them. Tally apologizes to Shay for everything that's happened and informs her that the only reason she betrayed Shay is because she was blackmailed into doing so, and Shay forgives her, but it's very evident that her attitude is being influenced by the brain lesions, so Tally does not feel a sense of closure to the issues that they had yet to resolve in their relationship. They get to a cave where they're all going to hide out, and all the escaped prisoners are hiding there except for Maddie and David, who are going to be hiding elsewhere for the night. The next night, they are all reunited, and Maddie says that she used Dr. Cable's tablet, which she stole, and hacked into to do some digging, and she now believes that she will be able to create a cure for the brain lesions. More people in Uglyville begin to visit the ruins, and the escapees begin to teach these various rebellious Uglies rebellious new tricks. They spread rumors, they show these people glimpses of the magazines, and they even start to spread rumors, or I suppose it would be truths, about the brain lesions. So it's planting these seeds of unrest among the people that will presumably blossom more in future books that I don't necessarily intend to read unless a film adaptation is coming for those as well, simply because I have too many other video projects I need to work on. Maddie finally finishes her work to where she has now created some pills that she believes will fix the brain lesions. They would like to try the pills out on Shay, but Shay does not consent to taking them. Tally is upset and wants to just force this solution on Shay, but for one, the pills are experimental, so there is a 1% possibility that they will not work and could turn the person who takes those pills into a vegetable. Maddie also reveals other reasons that she refuses to force a medical treatment on a patient without their consent. First of all, as a doctor, she took her Hippocratic oath, and moreover, she reveals to everyone that Az died because special circumstances forcibly performed a medical experiment on him to try to take away the memories of the smoke, but it failed, and that's why he is now dead. Since Az was the victim of a medical experiment experiment gone wrong and it was performed without his consent, Maddie will not experiment on Shay against her will. Tally then decides that she will go back, get caught, and be turned pretty, after which they can come get her again and give her the pills. She is consenting to all of this beforehand. David gets really upset and outraged by this. He refuses the idea, but Tally finally confesses everything to David. Maddie already knew about all of this, but she didn't tell David. She decided she would let Tally be the one to do it. Now, this part feels improbable. This feels like something that only exists because it's a YA book targeting a YA audience. I think any mother would have informed their son of something this serious, but no matter, we carry on with the story because it's almost over anyway. David leaves, distraught, and Maddie insists that Tally needs to go do her plan. But first, she needs to put her consent to the procedure in writing. Shay and Tally return to Uglyville after this, and they encounter a warden whom Tally informs of her identity and requests to be made pretty. And that is the end of this first book.
All my life, I wanted to be pretty.
Clearly, the way the book ends, it's left on this upward tilt to immediately lead into the next book, which I have not read, nor have I read any of the others in the series. So let's go through the film's trailer and note some of the details we can observe thus far. We see a clear futuristic aesthetic, dull concrete dorms for the Uglies, and more of this vibrant, pleasing to look at architecture for New Pretty Town. We see Tally having stolen the pig mask and sneaking around New Pretty Town to try to find Paris. That's from the very beginning of the book. We get a glimpse of their friendship before he has the surgery with the hand scars that they have. And then afterwards, his demeanor has changed.
Paris?
What are you doing here?
I was worried.
Things are just different here. You'll get it when you're pretty.
We see Tally with Shay, who doesn't like the system in place, and then Tally is reunited with Shay once again, further on into the story when she meets David and the rest of the people at the smoke. This sleeveless person is Croy. A blossoming connection between David and Tally is shown. They kiss in the trailer. We see glimpses of Dr. Cable as well as special circumstances, also when they come and attack the smoke. An interesting detail is Tally seemingly being scanned, which I believe is something done to prepare a person for their surgery. They have to get a lot of scans of a person so that they have all of the detailed information and are better informed on how to best optimize their appearance into the standard mold of what people are supposed to look like in this society. The fire helicopters seem to be operated by Croy. At least I think this is Croy operating one of them. Now that would be an interesting alteration to consolidate the material a bit instead of having so many different groups and factions, something that an uninitiated viewer could potentially struggle to keep track of. The helicopter also seems to be present for the large action sequences at the end of this story, which I would presume is being done as a way of elevating the scale of the action and try to draw in more viewers who want that level of grand spectacle in a dystopian sci-fi story like this, even one that's more so targeting a YA audience. One of the alterations that seem to stand out most to me in the trailer is what they've seemingly done with Paris. They appear to have him involved in a major way in the final climactic confrontation and battles that happen at the end of the book. Tally and David can be seen using the bungee jackets, going through special circumstances to try to do their rescue operation. But in the book, we do not see Paris at any point past the very beginning portions of the story. Tally sneaks in to see him in New Pretty Town. He comes to visit her after she doesn't get her operation, and that's it. But now we appear to have some sort of emotional, dramatic confrontation at the end, and things even get physical between him and David. So this could go a couple of ways. It could merely be a means of Tally having this ideological shift, and Paris represents her past and the status quo, society as she knew it, but David is her future, a new way of living that is free from the oppressive control and lack of bodily and psychological consent in the place that she grew up. They could also potentially do things with more of a love triangle that involves Tally and these two boys instead of it being Tally and Shay, who both have feelings for David. I'm interested in seeing what the film's action will consist of because this film is directed by Mick G, who directed the 2000s Charlie's Angels films, which I love. So I know that he's well aware of how to deliver some visual pizzazz if he's given the resources to do so. I think out of everything, what I'm most curious about is the film's ending because the book ends in such a way that it really does not feel like a complete story. You are left with the feeling like you are still stuck in the middle of things that are happening and you're presumably being compelled to read the next installment. Now that does not apply to me since, as I've said many times, I'm only reading this for the research for this film adaptation, but the case of the Uglies film is a curious curious one, because this was filmed about 3 years ago and it's only just now coming out. Now, I know that some films can take a bit longer to reach full completion with post-production and whatnot, but this is not a James Cameron's Avatar film. You're not going to be doing that much labor in post. Any film is, of course, a massive undertaking, but it's still very odd to me how long of a gap it's been from wrapping filming to only now finally getting it released. Even if they were to end the film in a way that leaves things open for continuing into the remaining books, what I've observed as a viewer and commentator of Hollywood's film and television industries, I do not believe that Netflix will greenlight more of these films. The level of success that any new release has to hit numerically for them to be willing to continue the story, it's very rare that any of their original works get to continue. It's very wasteful. It's a quantity over quality model, so I would hope that this film ends in a way that makes it feel like more of a complete story, or at least something that feels like it has a complete arc. It seems like maybe we could have a shot of Tally that could be her voluntarily surrendering to save the others in her group. That would still beg the question, though, of the issue of the brain lesions. Is Maddie still going to come up with a cure? Does she just already have it? You've got a lot of footage that is clearly coming from the final third portion of the book. You have the confrontation in the smoke, where Special Circumstances comes to snatch everyone up, Tally and David returning to the city to break into Special Circumstances, the message of the smoke lives in the sky, and people seemingly having escaped on their hoverboards. So I would guess that maybe they're moving things around a bit. Maybe the distraction of this message is happening during the escape instead of immediately leading up to it. But out of everything, I would say the biggest question mark I have for the film has to be the ending. Are you going to leave it open like a gaping wound of an unresolved cliffhanger? Or will you give the viewer some sort of closure with the story so that the film doesn't lose rewatchability? One facet I'm looking forward to is seeing how they will flesh out certain details of the story and characters, though. In the book, the narrative perspective is restricted by Tally. If she is not present for something, you will not know that it's happening. I am presuming the film will expand the scope in such a way that the audience will be able to follow things that are happening with characters and locations beyond whatever is happening with Tally specifically. Regardless, we're all going to find out in September, or maybe I should just say this month. By the time this video gets published, it should be September. The Uglies film comes out on Netflix on September 13th. Maybe I will review the film. It will depend on what I have time for, but feel free to let me know if you're interested in my thoughts on the execution of that adaptation.
With one elegant procedure, you'll be beautiful.